The next speaker, she cannot be with us, but she see everything in twice because she had a double degree. She also practiced two Paralympic sports, and she win medal Paralympic sports at the game in this twice sport, in cycling and in swimming. So she's amazing. She cannot be with us, but she let us a video. And it's Hannah MacDougall, and she will talk about elite para-athlete and his experience in the Australian team. Hannah.
Bonjour, hello, g'day, and a big hello to wherever you may be in the world at the moment. My name is Hannah MacDougall, and I'm here to present to you all today about the topic of uncertainty and how we can perhaps have a little bit of a leg up to this topic. Yes, I am an amputee, so there will be many amputee puns. I apologise in advance for this, and I also apologise that I can't be there in person with you all today. I've actually had a call up for some surgery for my residual limbs, so we're going to chop it off a little bit, which is kind of scary, but it'll be some short-term pain for long-term gain. But I'm so excited to be here digitally, and if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, please follow up with me at the end, and I will endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible. So before I do go any further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners or custodians of the land on not only which I am presenting to you today from, and for me personally, here in Melbourne, Australia, that is the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, to all traditional and owners of the land and custodians of the land from which we are all gathered and meeting from today. I think these people have thousands and thousands of years of resilience knowledge that we can learn from and grow with, and for me that's just so exciting. So a big acknowledgement and respectful thank you to all these people. So I would like to segue now a little bit into this beautiful story that I think encapsulates not only some strong Melbourne things, to be honest, around coffee, but other things we'll be focusing on in the presentation itself. Now, within this presentation, hopefully you'll get a feeling of some tools and strategies that elite athletes use within their own lives and that also exist within the literature to help deal with uncertainty. And along the way, I will share evidence with you, not only from research that I've done and collaborated with other authors with, but also personal experience within the world of being an elite athlete. And in that world, I'm a regular eater of all three items that you currently see on the screen in front of you. So as you can see, there's a carrot, an egg, and some coffee beans. Now, a little while ago, my mum came home from work one day and she was completely exhausted. And her mum, my grandma, was helping out and preparing some food for dinner, and mum kind of just flopped into the chair and grandma was like, "Oh, what's wrong, dear?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just so tired. I don't have anything left. My tanks are empty. I just don't know how I'm going to go forward. Put my next foot, what's going to be my next move? How am I going to take that next step?" And so my grandma asked her to follow her to the kitchen where she was preparing, was smelling delicious, by the way. It was a roast for the evening, wafting out, and she then gets out a few items from the fridge and the cupboard. So these items being a carrot, an egg, and some coffee beans. And she gets 3 individual saucepans, and she pops each item in a saucepan each. So you've got a pot with the carrot in it, a pot with the egg in it, and a pot with the coffee beans in it. And she then adds some water and she turns on the stove and begins to boil all of these 3 items. And Mum was just like, I can't think of any recipe that requires all of these 3 items. And she's like, maybe she's cooking some eggs for breakfast tomorrow, some carrots to go with dinner tonight, and getting my cup of coffee ready for the morning, because I definitely don't want to have it tonight because, you know, I won't sleep too well. And Mum knows how important sleep is to resiliency and dealing with uncertainty. So firstly, if we look at dealing with uncertainty, far out the past couple of years, they've definitely thrown a lot of uncertainty our way. And I collaborated with a few other authors around the world for a recent article where we looked at lessons during that initial phase in an elite sport setting from countries including France. So from Australia, I was the representative from Australia, Japan, the host country for the Olympics and Paralympics this year, and then also Canada and Sweden. And so what we did was we looked at, you know, we recognise that elite athletes are not immune to the effects on mental health that are created through crises such as pandemics, and that they do require a lot of support, including psychological support. And these support systems themselves need to include staff who are educated in and professionally qualified to work in that space with a great diversity of needs related to elite sports performance and mental health. Because not only do you have these rapidly changing situations, but you also then have that elite sport layer on top of that, which adds a lot of nuances, I believe. So we saw a lot of innovation through technology within this elite sport setting last year. So apps and using online sessions, and so through these we had opportunities to stay connected like everyone else, but we also then used them to perhaps train, to learn new skills, to race each other virtually. So I myself use this cycling platform called Zwift to race other people in real time around the world. And I don't know, if you had shares in Zwift pre-pandemic, you'll be laughing right now, that is for sure. So this article, we looked to identify the challenges and the opportunities and the support that was present across these 5 countries. And for some countries, there were kind of minimal interruptions per se. You could still train, whereas other countries, including Melbourne, Australia, or cities I should say, were in a severe lockdown where you could only go outside for an hour per day. You had a 5-kilometre radius, and it was super, super tough. So there was massive discrepancies across the board in terms of how athletes were able to train and to prepare for the Olympics and Paralympic Games. So it was really crucial during this time that athletes used their strengths. And one of those strengths, generally, when we look at elite athletes, is resiliency. Athletes, I like to talk about resiliency kind of at a micro daily level, and then also perhaps more at a macro level. And specifically, for example, when you're looking at athletes in Paralympic sports, they may have acquired a disability or an impairment, and they've had this this massive trauma, and had to learn a lot of resiliency through that. But then you have the micro day-to-day, so simple things like even if you're in a wheelchair, that, you know, accessing various venues and daily things that, you know, require small spurts of resiliency. So essentially what we found in this article was we need to keep collaborating during times of crisis and share knowledge, especially across the board, across countries. And I thought that was really beautiful how countries did break down some of those barriers. And so you had sports psychologists in France talking to sports psychologists in Canada, and we were able to perhaps remove some of those competitive spirits that help us get to the games and perform against one another, because we could see that, you know, this time was bigger than sport, and we needed to come together to get through this. So some of the common themes that we found were motivational issues. I mean, that probably isn't really any surprise, and there was a lot of stress and anxiety and a grief and loss process, especially with the routines that were put into disarray and a lack of access to training venues. And then you had athletes who were in buckets who were thinking of retiring last year, right? And then it's like, well, do I keep going? Do I not keep going? And massive life choices in that sense. But then you also identified the benefits. So you had perhaps extended recovery and preparation, especially if you were injured. Lots of variation in the support strategies across the world, but it made my heart kind of blossom, I suppose, to see, you know, strategies like mindfulness and compassion coming into play across the world during this time. So that was a great article and a research piece to be a part of. And I segue now into other strategies specifically to help with uncertainty. We know that sleep and getting quality sleep is a really, really important one. So as you can see on the screen, you know, best stress relief, immune booster, because you're helping to increase your white blood cell count when you're sleeping, and it's just so many other physiological mechanisms are kicking into play when we're sleeping. And what I love coming from the athlete space about sleep is I've personally got a really strong routine, and just like Cinderella has to leave by the tick of midnight, I tell people that I turn into a pumpkin at 9 p.m. And so I have to be in bed by 9 p.m. because when you're getting up at 5 a.m. to ride 100 kilometers on the bike, you've got to be able to perform, and sleep is a really, really important part of that. So we know from the literature that there's improvements in performance, in cognitive performance for athletes, and that training and competition can improve through getting that quality sleep. And if you look at that on the flip side as well, when you don't get a good night's sleep, then that can create some stress and anxiety leading into competition for athletes, because you want to be at your best to perform, right? So that's for me, and, you know, from a research perspective, sleep is a massive thing to be dealing with that anxiety. Now, if we move into a topic that is very, very close to my heart, mindfulness in sport. So I looked at mindfulness within my own research in that randomized control trial, and I think we're drawn to the things that help us the most. Now, without a doubt, we've seen mindfulness interventions have been proven to help with performance, to assist with well-being. They can help us with our psychological flexibility and adaptability. So when we're looking at dealing with uncertainty, I think this is a tool that you would not want to bypass. It's a bit of a game changer, but also recognizing that it's not a panacea. I think, unfortunately, we've had a mindfulness phase that we've seen recently, and that, you know, you can get everything from mindfulness treats for your dog to mindfulness vegan chicken burgers. Like, it's just absolutely crazy in terms of how the marketers are applying and spinning it. So we know that it's a really good thing, but we still don't know, we still have a lot to learn in this space. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is that when we are looking to practice mindfulness to deal with uncertainty, I would encourage us all, and especially in elite sport too, that we need to have a credible teacher. So somebody who practices themselves, has learned from various people across the world, whether it be secular or non-secular, in that approach. But there's that authenticity behind that practice and that understanding of what this practice is. We're not just drawing a card out of a cereal box and reading some instructions, for example. So with that, we can apply it in a holistic, maybe global well-being sense. And then if we look in sport itself, athletes can start applying this skill, this trait, this way of being into their training and their competition, and during times of crises such as the pandemic, to help deal with that uncertainty and improve performance, psychological flexibility, all of the things. Now, it's not something that happens overnight. It is a skill that all human beings inherently have. We're not, teaching anyone foreign. It is something in us all that we can tap into when we need to. And so what I thought was, just for the next few minutes, let's spend some time just doing a simple mindfulness practice together. So if I could ask you all now to push your feet firmly into the floor for me, and just rest your hands gently in your lap. And if you feel comfortable to do so, just gently close down your eyes. However, if this is not accessible for you today, that is perfectly fine. You can simply just gently lower your gaze and stare gently ahead. If you can imagine that there is a piece of string slowly pulling your spine up towards the ceiling. It's almost as if when you're doing this, your vertebrae are stacking slowly upon one another, so that we're tall and almost mountain-like in our posture, yet not stiff and erect. And I'd like to invite you to take a moment to check in, to bring awareness to presence. And so we can do that by feeling that ground firmly supporting our feet, and perhaps feeling the chair upon which we are seated. And just noticing the various pressure points. And perhaps also noticing your clothes against your skin. You may also notice perhaps some sounds that are beyond the space in which we are practicing today. You may also notice some sounds within the space in which you are practicing today. And perhaps sometimes you may become aware of silences between sounds. as we go from one sound to another, perhaps almost like a giant satellite just tuning in to various sounds for a few seconds before moving on to the next. And now just finally bringing your awareness even closer to the sound of your own breath. I'm not looking to control the breath here at all. Just let it flow of its own accord. And as we're doing this, you may notice that it's perhaps not so easy to keep your awareness centered on the breath, and undoubtedly already perhaps, or sometime soon, the mind will wander to thoughts or planning or feelings or emotions. And so if you do notice that the mind has wandered, this in itself, I believe, is a mindful moment. And just gently guiding your awareness back to that breath, your inhale and your exhale. And just gently resting that awareness on your breath. As we sit here with our awareness of the breath, I can encourage you just for a few rounds of breath to slightly lengthen your exhale. So whether that be adding a count or two perhaps onto that exhale. So if you've been roughly breathing in for 3, breathing out for 3, perhaps adding 1 or 2 and breathing out for 4 or 5 counts. Remembering that you do you. This isn't a competition. We're not at the Olympics or Paralympics. It's just a slow, gentle breath with a lengthened exhale. I'm just doing one more round of breath with that longer exhale. And as you finish that round, just let your breath return to a natural rhythm. And just take a moment to check in with your body, your mind. Notice perhaps if there has or has not been any shifts for you during this very short practice session of mindfulness and breath work. And perhaps also just summoning a little bit of gratitude for taking this time to pause. And just bringing a little bit of movement back into the body, wiggling some fingers, some toes, having a bit of a stretch, and gently opening your eyes and bringing yourself back into the space in which you've been practicing. So we've just done a little bit of mindfulness and a little bit of breath work. And so we've already heard about how potentially mindfulness can be helpful for dealing with uncertainty by enabling us to take that step backwards from all of these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, our biases that we get fused with and hooked by. Mindfulness allows us to take that step back and see them for what they are, rather than be so caught up in them. Whereas breathwork, slightly different in that we are perhaps tapping into some more structured physiological changes that can occur through breath manipulation. So specifically, we know that breath training can not only expand our lungs, and that it's something we do 20 to 30,000 times a day on average every 3.3 seconds, and that up to 90% of people aren't breathing correctly. Whereas if we look at breathing in an elite sport sense, we know that it can improve performance and can be a very powerful tool for psychological purposes as well. So I think that tool is one that can play a big role in elite sport and general population settings. And then the final one that I wanted to touch upon today, which hopefully, you know, is a no-brainer, definitely after the last couple of years, are our support networks. So we know that that connection, those relationships, they're within all major well-being models that have been developed. So your PERMA, your flourishing, your self-determination theory, all of these things. In my own research, it was those relationships with coaches, with teammates, with friends, with family, that all helped people to deal with that uncertainty during COVID itself, in both the elite sports setting and just a general population setting. And that man on the screen in front of you, that's my stepdad. He married my mum when I was about 10 years old. Bless him. That was the beginning of my swimming journey as an elite athlete, and he was the one nominated to drive me to swim training at 12 minutes past 4 every single morning. And so the day I got my license was the happiest day of his life. But those support networks are absolutely critical in this uncertainty space. And similarly, you know, that there was that strong connection between mum and grandma. So mum was, you know, went along and was kind of hesitant, but wanting to understand what grandma was getting to with these 3 pots on the stove. And she boiled the crap out of the carrot, the egg, and the coffee beans. And she then proceeded to explain this madness to mum by saying, we're all faced with uncertainty and turmoil in our lives. So that hot water is a representation of that uncertainty, that turmoil, that change. And we don't want to be like that carrot who went in nice and strong and has come out all limpy from facing that uncertainty. We don't want to be like that egg either, who went in hard on the outside and gooey on the inside and came out really brittle and hard-boiled afterwards. We don't want to be like that either. We want to be like the coffee beans. So those coffee beans went in as beans and they came out as coffee. They were transformed positively by that experience, by that turmoil. So let's be more like the coffee beans, whether it be as an elite athlete, harnessing those skills of sleep, mindfulness, breathwork, support networks to deal with that uncertainty, but I think also in our own lives. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. If anybody has any questions, more than happy to have a chat. Hannah@hannahmacdougall.com.au. Just shoot me an email. Take care.
Thank you, Hannah. She can't hear me, but thank you, Hannah. It was really interesting. I hope you enjoy to breathe. It's funny because in fencing, it's really important also to have some breaks to disturb your opponent, or to create an idea in your head, or to try to create a good idea. And also to breathe, and it's really important. There is some techniques. You can use your shoelaces. Please, Mr. Referee, I need my laces. Bra strap or eye contact, please. I need a break because I don't have any ID, so please. And it's really important for us today. The break will be a coffee break. It's just behind you. It's about 30 minutes. And my advice is also to show there is an artist, Jan. Jan, if you hear me. Hello, Jan. It's really important if you want to see. Because he's doing an amazing job, so he's a painter, so yes. Enjoy the break.